I would like to ask you a couple of questions, just slightly switching gears on you here, but regarding AI driving innovation and growth in ERP. So, how do you see AI transforming the way companies approach ERP and business systems in the coming years? I know that's a bit of a general question, but how do you see AI transforming the way companies approach ERP or ERP organizational change in general?
Okay, so on this question, if I may narrow it down a little bit to making two observations. So the first one is to do with, as I said previously, to do with the business objectives, with what's the ultimate strategy, what we want to achieve. So I think once we have that in place, we will be able to work out step by step every single process that will be impacted by this technology. My submission to you is that at the end of the whole digital transformation, I don't think there will be not even one single business process left untouched by this technology. So to answer your question, I think everything will be affected, impacted. It's down to the decision makers to know what questions to ask, to identify what the direction of travel is and choose which one fits them. And finally, I think it's very important in the process to understand that we might be in a position where we need to reconfigure the way we operate entirely as a business. So the operational model will be completely redesigned. And that will have deep implications on the profitability models. And I would not, from experience, I would not recommend going ahead with AI deployment without actually understanding how these changes interact with each other. What's the interplay? I hope I answered your question, which was quite generous.
Yeah, no, that's great, Claire. I think that, one of the things that here at Nestell Associates we're very interested in is this idea of what we call the triad, right? And that's people, processes, and technology in the context of successful ERP organizational change. And I do think that AI is going to have a profound effect on that relationship. And I think it's still it's too early to say to what extent and how, just because I think it's still not understood on exactly what the impact will be and how it will touch and change processes. And but it's just a fascinating topic, to be sure, and one that we've talked quite a bit about in the past, and certainly will continue to discuss on this podcast. Very interesting idea.
I think on the people's point you just mentioned, I think I'd like to share with you one of my core held values about digital transformation. You'll achieve digital transformation at a faster rate if you invest in educating people, everybody, from the board of director all the way down to the receptionist. I mean, everybody. And I've chosen these words deliberately based on experience, but also deliberately. Yes, the receptionist, everybody needs to become AI literate. AI literacy in organizations pretty much doesn't exist. It's until very recently was reserved to centers of excellence. You must have heard like a lot of companies wanted to be innovative, embrace innovation, and they created a center of excellence. And by implication, meaning that whoever was not in the center of excellence, they were not excellent. So they were like, yeah. Right. So I'm not a believer in this. And actually, I criticize it every time I get a chance. Why? Because as we deploy this technology, everybody will be excellent or will need to be excellent. Everybody will need to have this level of AI literacy to be able to understand how the systems operate and also pick up on various risks as they appear at various points when you train an algorithm or when you procure it or when you maintain it. So if people have this level of AI literacy, and I don't mean by that, I don't mean coder level AI literacy. No, basic AI literacy. When everybody has this literacy, they will be able to understand how important it is for everybody to come together and reconfigure business processes. Find out where the risks are in places where you might not even think that risks might appear. So it actually, you build a very strong workforce when you educate everybody and everybody becomes AI literate. So I'm a great believer that we need that. And unfortunately, we don't have it. And that's where we have so many misconceptions and misunderstandings. Because obviously, if not everybody understands what's happening, then how can we possibly, have a common ground of conversation?
And Clara, but doesn't that go back to as well to your idea of establishing AI principles and a framework for AI adoption? Is that's the sort of thing that needs to be baked into your AI adoption plan, right? Is this idea of
Absolutely. But don't
yeah,
get me wrong. I'm like, I had people who would come to me and say, like, what do you mean train the receptionist? I mean, they don't need to be trained. And I said, well, you'd be surprised, actually.
yeah,
You
yeah,
might find out that your receptionist is this 21-year-old, just came out of university, or maybe didn't even go to university, but actually they love data. And if you just give them the chance to work and get a little bit of training in AI basic, they might become your next member of your data science team. And I've seen,
yeah.
by the way, I'm not speaking from creating stuff. It's actually, I know a case when a receptionist went from being a receptionist to actually becoming a very influential member of their data science team. And as a company, there is value in this, because you create this internal mobility which enable people to move to places where it would cost you less to train your people, your current employees, than to pay for outside talent. So this is on a few observations on the people side. But my submission is that as we go into this digital transformation, we need to think of creating a new department, which would be called, my title, I don't know if that's going to stay, digital resources. Just like we have human resources, um, we will have digital resources. And by that, I mean a congregation of AI algorithms, which will need to be managed, will need to be trained, will need to be pretty much looked at as if they are the digital equivalent of the human capital that we have in an organization. And only then, when we will go to that place, you will see that things start making sense when it comes to adoption of AI. A sure thing, when you hire somebody, you have a set process of evaluating that candidate, testing that candidate, and then eventually signing a contract with them and making them your employee. In the same way, we have to go through the same motions to recruit technology, deploy that technology, and maintain it, and keep it accountable. And that's very important. Keep that technology accountable, because if we don't have it accountable, that's when the problems arise.
Claire, can you share? Obviously, AI is relatively in its early stages, in its infancy in terms of deployment. But can you share maybe some examples to put you on the spot of how AI has driven innovation and growth in ERP or business systems for organizations that you've worked with?
I can give you an example of how a company used AI, a very simple form of AI system, to predict default. So the question was like, okay, so I hear everybody wants AI. What are we going to do with AI? So I thought to myself, like, how about we do this? Because you have a lot of data, you have a large loan book, so we can look at your loans and see who might be very likely, because we can predict that with a very high level of accuracy, um, who might be in the default position. And lo and behold, yes, we run that, and we identify a handful of people. The bank wrote to them, and something on the lines, "We are your bank, and we're writing to you to say that in case you need help, we're here for you." That's all it was. It was nothing else. Nothing very specific or complicated, or like wordsmithing requiring complex input. No. And the interesting response was that the default rate from what was predicted got reduced significantly, which is a win for any banks or any lenders, because that any default carries a cost to them. So predicting that default, preempting it, dealing with it, actually enable people to say, well, hang on a minute, I'm happy that the bank is on my side. The lender is on my side for once. What a breath of fresh air. And actually, long term, those customers who received that letter stayed on with the bank, and some of them ended up, being very successful in their career and, moving some of their funds to other departments of that bank and actually staying and cross selling, staying with the same supplier, with the same vendor, but just buying other services from them. So, this is an example of how you can innovate, but actually looking after your customers and building that trust, which I mentioned to you earlier. That trust is, we can build it or we can destroy it. Just one line of code, we can achieve that. So, this is an example of how we can innovate and actually make a difference, build new business and build business that stays with us, customers that trust us, and they want to entrust more business to us over time.